Have you seen that episode of Friends where Ross and Chandler are taking the sofa up the stairs and Ross keeps saying over and over, pivot, pivot, pivot? Well, what if that thing you were pivoting wasn't a sofa, but your entire career?
I was a bill collector for a long, long time. I was freshman, even though I was in my middle 30s. And let me tell you, I thought math was going to be the death of me.
Today on Naked Nuclear, we're bringing you the story of Dr. Jennifer Watkins, an advanced nuclear fuels researcher at the Idaho National Laboratory. Dr. Watkins obtained her PhD from Boise State in the Micron School of Material Sciences. On this episode, we're bringing you the story of how she pivoted from a credit card bill collector to leading a team at one of the most advanced nuclear research labs in the nation. So, where does the story begin?
I was born and raised in Idaho, so not far from Boise, outside of Boise in the Treasure Valley. And still most of Idaho's really rural. So I grew up on like a little farming, ranching community. So we had horses and 4-H. And I was like, I don't really want to do this. I was interested in science, but not necessarily nuclear, because nuclear is not, with the exception of Idaho National Lab, it's really not in Idaho, right? We get all of our power from hydroelectricity. Not all of it, but most of it.
Most. And like every kid at age 10, they either want to be an astronaut, a marine biologist, or a doctor when they grow up. And that might have been the case for Dr. Watkins.
Actually, I really wanted to be a medical doctor, even up through the time I was getting ready to graduate from high school. I actually thought I was going to be a neurosurgeon. That was kind of the thought that I had. Now, thankfully, that's not what happened. Probably don't have the bedside manner for it.
Dr. Watkins doesn't become a neurosurgeon. So what happened instead?
Yeah, so it was a little bit strange. Did really well in high school and probably should have gone straight to college. And that was kind of the direction I was headed, but just life circumstances happened. And so I got a job straight out of high school and I got into the collection field. So like I was calling people, I was a bill collector for a long, long time. So it started out like credit cards and, things like that. And then I transitioned over to the city of Boise and was in the collection office there doing like utilities and parking tickets and court fines, all that kind of stuff. But, I was pretty good at it and I enjoyed it for a while, but it's not a positive job. And really the people that I worked with made my job enjoyable. The people that I started out with, they kind of transitioned to other things. And I was like, you know what? I need to go do something else. I need to go look at doing something else.
So there's that still small voice calling out, saying, pivot, pivot, pivot. So that's where nuclear energy has to come into the picture, right?
I actually thought I would go into like biology. So I met with the head of the biology department at Boise State. Obviously, I wasn't planning on leaving the Boise area. And I was a Boise State fan. So, of course, the head of the biology department said, well, what do you want to do when you're done? Want to just be a lab tech? And I'm like, well, no, not really. And he's looking at my transcripts. And of course, it had been a long time since I'd been in high school, right? But he's looking at my high school transcripts. And he's like, unless you're planning on getting a doctorate, which at the time I was not, I just, my bachelor's degree, he said, you need to go be an engineer. And I was really taken aback because the only engineers I knew worked at the city.
All the best heroes' journeys have the answer to the call and the subsequent questioning of said call. We've all been in that situation, that still small voice saying, I can't develop that. I'm not a coder. I can't finish a novel. I'm not a writer. I can't talk on stage. I'm not a speaker. But what does it actually mean to be a coder, a writer, a speaker, and advanced nuclear fuels research engineer? Do you have to do the thing before you can say you are the thing? And if you've never taken any engineering classes or tinkered to build anything, how could you call yourself an engineer? It'd be pretty easy to say, I'm not an engineer, if you've never done engineering. So, what did Dr. Watkins say?
No, I'm not an engineer. He pretty much kicked me out of his office and sent me over to the engineering building. And I had a meeting with Dr. Amy Mall, who was the material science program there. She was very vibrant and passionate about what she did. I had zero idea what material science was. I really wasn't on board with this whole engineering thing, but she had this cool dog in her office, and I was just like, all right, you know what? Fine, I'll try it. And that's how I got into it.
So, our hero starts her hero's journey. But it wasn't without fear and apprehension.
Right, right. I was like starting from scratch. I went part-time, obviously, because, I had big girl bills to pay. And so I still needed a full-time job. But after a couple of years and I got through the first little bits of basics, I was like, man, if I'm going to do this, I really need to be all in on this. Thankfully, I had some really good friends and a support system that I was able to leave my full-time job, which was really scary. We had known for 16 years. And yeah, I became a student, full-time student. And I
And a good one at that.
I mean, I did okay. But I mean, it was hard. You still got to study. And let me tell you, I thought math was going to be the death of me. You get through it and, make those friendships in college like everyone does, and study groups. For about a year and a half, it was suggested to me that I get into one of the research groups. I looked at the couple that they'd said the professors were hiring, and Dr. Daryl Butt ran the advanced materials lab.
Now, material science is an immensely large field. Think of materials, tables, floors, doors, marbles, steel, uranium. Boise State, Dr. Watkins' alma mater, is currently exploring the use of DNA to program quantum information systems. I don't even know what that means, but for Dr. Watkins, in this immensely large sea of materials, nuclear bobbed up to the surface.
At the time, it wasn't called the Micron School of Material Science, but it was the material science program. He has an amazing background. Like, he's done sorts of things, and has a background in nuclear, right? So was doing fuels research, but he was doing a lot of different things. Is a ceramicist and an artist, and it was just all these different things that I got to do. And I went in to talk to him, and I think he'd already decided, yeah, I'll hire you. The first thing I got to work on was we looked at a skull. We did a project with the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore where we looked at a mummy portrait. But really, I was like, I want to get into this nuclear, I want to do the fuels work.
So finally, our hero has reached her first quest: nuclear fuels. And what is it about nuclear fuels that drew her to this field originally?
And I was like, wow, this is really cool, because I had no idea that we had anything like that at Boise State. What? They do like radioactive stuff. And just as I started looking into it, it's so amazing. And of course, this isn't really like a scientific answer to this question. Nuclear is kind of like magic. So much power in something so small that you can't even, right? It's like mind-boggling. This is so cool. That is just what I tell people. I'm like, I know that's not the scientific thing. I can speak scientifically about it, and I wanted to do it. So I think being a non-traditional student helped with that. They had not had any undergraduates that were handling the nuclear material at the time. Our lab manager, who was getting his PhD, I got to mentor under him and, learn how these ATF fuels are They were called accident tolerant fuels, but I think we pushed forward to advanced technology fuels, which is more appropriate.
Accident tolerant fuels, now known as advanced technology fuels. What is ATF? So, when people think about nuclear, specifically nuclear energy, reactors, power plants, they most notoriously relate them to nuclear fuel reactor meltdowns. And the fuel sources are one of the sources of power, but also the capability to melt down. So, an accident tolerant or advanced technology fuel is a type of fuel that, when put into a stressful situation, doesn't, melt down.
I started looking at uranium mononitride. That was the fuel type that my mentor was looking at. It is one of the accident tolerant candidates or advanced technology candidates. It's got more uranium density, higher thermal conductivity. So just a lot of material properties that are better than what our benchmark fuel currently is.
Okay.
But it has a problem. It's air sensitive and it's very water sensitive. Yeah, we're going to put it into a water reactor. So most of my work was on looking at methods and ways to improve the corrosion resistance of these ATF fuels.
Now, Dr. Watkins is studying uranium mononitride. Do you remember earlier in this podcast episode where she mentioned that she wasn't going to get a doctorate?
Like I said earlier, I didn't plan on getting a doctorate, right? But my advisor was like, no, no. My senior year, he was like, I will offer you a grad student position right now if you'll stay. I'm like, well, let me think about it. I decided, well, yeah, I think I'll go ahead and do this.
Mhm.
About 30 days after I signed my grad student contract, he accepted a position at University of Utah. And our lab manager, who had graduated with his PhD, was taking over. And so we agreed that he would take me on. We had millions of dollars worth of equipment in this lab at Boise State. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I want to do. I stayed to do that.
Now, the cogs just seem to align for Dr. Watkins, because after she decides that she's going to stay at Boise State, she then gets a fellowship from the Department of Energy.
As part of that was applying for fellowships, and I was lucky enough to get the Department of Energy Nuclear Energy University program. That was a really advantageous moment for me. But as part of it, you needed to do a 10-week internship at a Department of Energy location. I'm working on fuels. I'm in Idaho. I'm going to INL, of course.
That's where Dr. Watkins really starts to dig deeper into nuclear fuels research.
We were working on a project for Westinghouse where we were doing silicide fuel, uranium silicide. And we were working on making pellets that were going to go into lead test rods that would be the first non-oxide fuel that would be irradiated in a commercial reactor.
So let's pause. The first non-oxide fuel that would be irradiated in a commercial reactor? What does that even mean? So, oxide fuels are the classic fuel types when you think about nuclear reactors. They can be prone to overheating during a reactor accident, which is why there's such a push for accident-tolerant fuels. The new fuels that Dr. Watkins researches includes the nitrides and silicides, nitrogen and silicon blends instead of oxygen.
So that was what I got to work on during my internship. And of course, that was successful. Those pellets have since been irradiated, been pulled out. And so that was a big achievement. And because of that work, I got offered the INL graduate fellowship, which meant that I would finish my classes at Boise State. And once I was done with my classwork, then I would come out to INL and finish my research.
This sounds like every researcher's dream, being awarded fellowships and scholarships in order to do your work. But it didn't come without hard work.
I spent the night in the lab changing gases and running, running synthesis. I remember working over winter break every day. I was in the lab that 3 weeks of winter break, right? Ended up in a pit. So that all went into my dissertation. It was long and it was rough. After I came to INL, um, things just move a little bit slower out there, not university work where you're still safe, but I didn't have to have a health physicist and a radiological control and a shift supervisor. I didn't have people with me to get my work done. And then, of course, COVID. But during COVID, I wrote like 3 review papers that got put out on ATM.
Nice.
So that was nice. That time at home allowed me to do that.
Let's step back and take a little bit of perspective. Why the push for accident-tolerant fuels in the first place? What's driving the nuclear resurgence? What is this new nuclear movement and why is it happening? Well, we need power, we need infrastructure, and we need it clean, and we need it now. So when I asked Dr. Watkins, what's the big deal about advanced nuclear fuels research, she gave me a pretty in-depth answer.
Well, I'll start off with explaining what you got uranium, right? Just uranium that you could dig up out of the ground is just natural uranium. So it has 0.7% of our fissionable isotope, which is U-235. So in our current commercial reactors, we have to enrich the fuel to no more than 5%. That's regulatory. We can't go any further than that. So anything between 5 and 20% enriched is what is considered HALEU, or high assay low enriched uranium. And that's what these advanced reactors need so that there's more fissionable material so that they can get more power density out of a smaller sized core. That's how they're going to make them smaller, how we're going to make them portable. Everyone's interested in HALEU, right? Whether it's HALEU oxide or HALEU metal fuel or the other ceramics, nitride, they've got to have that extra uranium density in there, and they all want that. And that's how we're sizing these reactors down.
So who exactly wants HALEU and where are they located?
We've got a lot of work spread out. Some of our group is working with TerraPower. I've been heavily involved with Global Nuclear Fuel in North Carolina, collaborating with them. They're the ones that we made the HALEU UO2 for. And yeah, it seems like everybody's really interested in the nitrides right now.
Another way to think of this is a big, lumbering, all-wheel drive SUV versus a certified F1 race car. Now, the race car is going to need a lot more efficient fuel and a lot more dense fuel.
Like I said before, getting these units smaller, more flexible, so they're less expensive. And in order to do that, you've got to raise your power density. It's got to have more of that U-235s, right? So they can't go with 5%. 5% is not going to cut it. The neutronics of it won't work. HALEU is still nuclear fuel, but it's more like race car fuel versus fuel that I would put in my car, right? Higher octane, I guess.
With new fuel types, higher density fuel type, better thermal conductivity, leading the way for advanced modular reactor research, it's no wonder that Dr. Watkins is actually pretty hopeful for the future.
I would like to see a nuclear reactor everywhere. Whatever power needs we have, we'll get from our own nuclear reactor. I'd love to see that everywhere. It's not as common in the West. We don't have many reactors as I do back East. I would like to see that. Obviously, I want to have nuclear be automatically connected to green energy instead of people thinking, oh, I don't know anything about nuclear. It's not any different than they think about a power plant anywhere else.
There's all this mystery around what a nuclear reactor is or isn't. So how does Dr. Watkins break it down?
Yeah, everybody, it's like mysterious. Really not. A nuclear reactor is really just a different way to boil water, just a big
different tea kettle.
It's not any different than coal plant or gas plant, right? We're just heating water to turn a turbine to generate electricity. It's just how we're be generating that heat. That's the difference. And that people should know that they can get into the nuclear industry, right? You need people to work in it, and you don't have to work with fuels. You can work in the nuclear industry and do lots of different things. There's modeling, there's nuclear medicine, transportation, construction. If we're going to build all these new reactors, we've got to have people that are going to build them. And people shouldn't think that you have to have a PhD to work in nuclear, right? I mean, I do, yes, but you don't have to.
If you're a listener and you're thinking right now, how do I pivot into the direction of a job or career in the nuclear field? Where do I begin with that?
Look it up. What kind of industry are you interested in? You want to be involved in the energy sector? Do you want to do policy? Would you like medical or in safety and security, like our safeguards, right? That's one of the things that they always need. There's been a couple of times where, let's say for COVID, for example, when we shut down the site, I guarantee you we still had our guards out there.
The guards did not go home during COVID.
If they have a research lab, they'll have a website probably. See what piques your interest. If you have the ability to, go down there and talk to them in person. That's probably where I see if you could get in, look them up, see what kind of research they're doing. If you're not afraid to pick up the phone and give them a call, something like that. Yeah. Because they want to see that passion from you too. You shouldn't worry about if you're too old to start it, right? I was 36 when I started. So yeah, I don't maybe recommend that path, but
Going to school with 19-year-olds?
yeah, that was I obviously have some really great friends who are, 20 years younger than me. But if you are looking at going to university and want to get into that area, find a professor that's working in the field that you're interested in. You just have to reach out to them and, find out, do they spot in their research lab? Because if they're doing nuclear, they have a research lab. If you're just looking to switch into the nuclear field, into industry, you could reach out to recruiters, LinkedIn, see who's hiring in that industry. And don't be put off by term, the nuclear term, right? So a good example is we were looking for a metallurgist in our group. And we were not getting any candidates for it. We're just like, nobody was applying. What is it? Like, it pays really well. Like, well, yeah, scientists are, yeah, we're interested for the science, everything, but I'm going to tell you, money's nice too. So we just couldn't figure out why we weren't getting any candidates. And it's like, maybe it's because they don't have the nuclear background, right? Your skills can be transferable to the nuclear sector just because you don't have nuclear experience. If there are people that are interested in or considered switching to the nuclear sector, obviously we're having a resurgence right now, right? So now's the time to get in. Get in on it because that's where you want to be.
Again, there's that word resurgence.
Yeah, I think people are coming on board with the fact that we will not meet climate change goals. If nuclear does not mix, it will not happen. The renewables are great, solar, wind, hydro, but there's no way we will meet these climate change mandates if we don't have nuclear. These small reactors, that's how we're going to accomplish that. We have to be able to have something that's stable and able to provide electricity to the power grid 24/7. And nothing does that like nuclear.
But what about safety? Is nuclear safe? When people think of nuclear reactors, they think of Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, the Fukushima disaster. How safe is the nuclear industry?
Yeah, I think we've been able to show that despite the fear-mongering that some people like to immediately jump to when the word nuclear comes out, I think shown that it is safe. It's one of the safest industries, actually. We've been doing it since the 1940s, and we've been doing it safely. there's drawbacks to anything, right? Yeah, we have nuclear waste. We know that that has to be dealt with, but we've been dealing with it safely for all this time. It's not as um, big of an issue as I think the perception is. These advanced reactors also will be able to get less waste out of them as we'll be able to achieve higher burnups. So you're burning off some of that really radioactive waste. We know how to deal with it safely.
And so, as you've been listening to this podcast, if you're anything like me and you hear Dr. Watkins' story and think, she's not real, this is not real, she's just casually leading the forefront of advanced nuclear research technology, switched careers, got a PhD, and made it look really easy. One of the things I wanted to bring is a little more human aspects. So here's a quick rapid fire sequence where we get to learn a little bit more about Dr. Watkins when she's not involved in the nuclear energy space. So if you had to give a TED Talk, only had 4 minutes to prepare, what would you talk about if it was not your subject matter that you're an expert in?
Cosmetics and makeup.
I just feel like there's a whole other podcast on that. Okay, so if you're not in the lab, what other hobbies are you getting up to?
I like to go golfing, obviously reading, being outdoors. I have 2 national parks that are an hour and a half away from me. So I like to go hiking. And I also do online gaming.
Oh, nice. Okay. If you weren't a subject matter expert in nuclear fuel types, what other fields would you try to master?
Photography. I like photography. And I had this vision of one time that I wanted to be a florist.
And lastly, could you describe paleo with only using candy types?
I think the best analogy I can give to that would be it's like milk chocolate and dark chocolate. So milk chocolate is like regular LEU, it's got a little less cocoa in it. Dark chocolate has got more cocoa. It's just got a lot more of the good stuff. And it's still chocolate, but
maybe like a little bit better. And her suggestions for who she would want to hear next on this podcast?
I think if you could find someone in industry, right? Get with one of the companies that's getting these new reactors to market. It's always interesting to hear from policy people as well. Had I not done fuels, I was looking at going into like the nuclear forensics portion of it or like safeguards and security.
And her final words of advice for those who are maybe interested or so pulled to make the pivot?
Yeah, you just have to persevere and don't be a perfectionist. I never thought I would flunk a test in my life, and I flunked more than one. And guess what? I still get to be called doctor. So just perseverance. Have a good support system. Just don't give up. Obviously, if I can go back to school at 36 and not be as strong in math, and I'd have an engineering degree. Yeah, you can do it.
So, in summary, if you are thinking about a career in nuclear, number 1, look it up. Go find a professor, go to the lab, and talk to them. Number 2, see what you're already interested in. Number 3, see what skill sets might apply that you already have. And number 4, it's never too late to go back to school. Not even at 36, not even at 46. For the rest of the season, we're taking Dr. Watkins' advice, and we'll be talking to some of the policymaking people, the grassroots efforts and movements around the nation that are championing nuclear. We'll also have radiation technicians on the show talk about investing in nuclear energy and uranium mining. The very contentious uranium mining that will be happening potentially in the United States and what that means for indigenous tribal lands. This has been Naked Nuclear, stripping down the topics in nuclear energy and technology. Special thanks to Dr. Jennifer Watkins for accepting my invitation on this show. Sydney Weeks for coordinating all of the scheduling and follow-ups involved, as well as the Idaho National Laboratory for giving us their blessing to record this show. Thanks again for listening.